people are always above everything. I know it's a very nebulous statement, but I've always put people before everything, before process, before this, before that. The reason I feel so strongly about and the connections that I have for people in automotive is I think we all have very unique backgrounds. Every human being walking the earth has a unique background. Right. My version of unique is that growing up, I kind of straddled the line between the haves and the have-nots. Early in my life, I got the belief that it was ordained. You were going to have it or you weren't going to have it. And that was just how the world worked for me until I got into the car business, where I saw people who were maybe had come from the ordained to not have it, get into an industry without advanced degrees in mathematics or astrophysics or any actors or rappers, right? Just regular people coming into this industry and learning by proxy all the things that may have been kept from them because they didn't learn it in their home, right? And so that connection that I have is because I've seen firsthand over the past 20 years what this industry can do for people who may not have gotten that same shake elsewhere.
All right, I'm sitting down now with the man, Matt Jones, Communication Director at TrueCar. I've had so much fun getting to know you more deeply. I would say over the last year, lots of interactions, obviously, through the Automotive State of the Union stuff. And so I just want to thank you for sharing some time with me today here on the podcast.
It's reciprocal. Thank you for sharing some of your time with me. And it has actually been fun over the past year, getting to know you a little bit better and seeing what all the hoopla is about. Every once in a while, it actually pans out. And you're one of those cases where it actually pans out. So thank you for not just the time, but thank you for being dope. I appreciate it.
Hoopla achieved. I want to kick this off. We were just in Tampa together. So at time of recording, if you're listening into the future, right around this time, we were in Tampa at Digital Dealer. And with the Automotive State of the Union, you participated in the premiere, red carpet premiere of the new show that I guess I can say we're producing because I'm part of it, in partnership with TrueCar, called More Than Cars. And afterwards, you got up on, or I guess it was before we watched it, you were up on stage and getting interviewed. And one of the things that just really piqued my interest is how deeply I felt your connection to the people in this industry. And I'm curious, ever since, I'm curious, where does that come from? Have you always felt that way about people? Is that something you learned over time? What is it about this industry, perhaps in particular, that you feel such a deep connection to?
Well, people are always above everything. As far as I'm concerned, they're just people come first. I know it's a very nebulous statement, but I've always put people before everything, before process, before this, before that. People are the center of the universe as far as I'm concerned. And the reason I feel so strongly about and the connections that I have for people in automotive is I have a very, I actually take that back. I think we all have very unique backgrounds. Every human being walking the earth has a unique background. Right. My version of unique is that growing up, I kind of straddled the line between the haves and the have-nots. I grew up in an area in Southern California called the San Fernando Valley. And, if you have ever seen a TV show, there's a good chance that you've seen something that was made in the San Fernando Valley. Everybody talks about Hollywood, but the shows are actually made and the stars actually live in the San Fernando Valley, right?
Gotcha.
But within the San Fernando Valley, you go 5 or 6 miles that way, then, oh boy, it's a completely different world, right? So in a real experience in my high school, I had Blossom and some of the kids from 90210, but I also had people who would stab you in your face if you got out of line, right? I'm just being honest. I don't know how to say it any other way, right? You go a couple miles that way and you're essentially in the Hollywood Hills, or you're going over Laurel Canyon and you've got all the money in the world, right? You go that way and you're 2 steps away from destitute poverty. And that's what the San Fernando Valley is, right? And so when I say that my version of unique is I saw the haves and the have-nots, I noticed a difference in how people lived when they had and when they had not. And early in my life, and I could be wrong, but early in my life, I got the belief that it was ordained. You were going to have it or you weren't going to have it. And that's just what it was. That's just
Right.
what it was. Like,
Right.
because the people that I had seen who were like my buddies who were, none of us had a dollar. Coincidentally, their parents didn't have a dollar, right? But the other buddies who got the high school cars, coincidentally, their parents also had very nice cars. Either you had it or you didn't. And that was just how the world worked for me until I got into the car business, where I saw people who were maybe had come from the ordained to not have it, get into an industry without advanced degrees in mathematics or astrophysics or being actors or rappers, right? Just regular people coming into this industry and learning by proxy all the things that may have been kept from them because they didn't learn it in their home, right? Like, so an easy example is, how do you manage money? Well, I learned that, and people learn that. My friends and my peers learn that in car dealerships when they might not have learned it in their homes. And so that connection that I have is because I've seen firsthand over the past 20 years what this industry can do for people who may not have gotten that same shake elsewhere. And it's not by construct or anything. I'm not talking about societal woes or anything. I'm just saying, if you're shaking paint at Home Depot, they're not going to teach you about credit, right? Because that has no applications for shaking paint at Home Depot. But if you're a tech at a car dealership and 2 spaces over from you is somebody who's dealing with $100 million of financing a month, you are going to learn some things that you may not have learned elsewhere. And so as I see people's careers build, families build, and buying homes and sending their kids to college, how could I not be in love? Like, how could I literally not be in love, Right. So, you take that over, I sold cars in Southern California at some pretty big dealerships over the course of 12 years. And we know that dealerships have a pretty high attrition rate. So I've come across thousands of people, right? And even before I got into the car business, I had been in retail for another 6 years prior. So I did like 18 years of commissioned retail sales. I've seen a lot of people, and I've seen how this business has innovated and changed lives. It's impossible to not be, connected to that. It's just literally impossible. I sit here and talk about it like it's my child. Like I have so much love for the industry.
Hey, we're going to dive back into this episode in just 1 minute. But before we do, I want to tell you about my amazing agency, FlexDealer.com. You see, at Flex, we're not like the other guys. We are focused on building deep relationships of trust with you, rooted in the spirit of partnership, so that you can have the confidence that somebody finally has your best interests at heart. Over the last decade or more, I've been assembling a team who has a variety of expertise in digital marketing, from website creation and design to inventory management, software creation to SEO and PPC, everything in between. But perhaps the most important piece is unique strategy creation that's tailored to your needs, that takes into consideration the unique demands of your markets, the car buyers and vehicle shoppers in your market, and in a way that's going to allow you to outshine and outsell the competition right where you're located. So if you're kind of just tired of working with other marketing vendors who you feel aren't prioritizing your needs, or pass you from agent to agent, or just take forever to do the most simple stuff, or maybe just don't ever answer the dang phone, head over to FlexDealer.com to learn about our partnership-focused marketing strategies that are designed to meet your business goals with the demands of the market, so that you can finally experience the results you're looking for with a partner who has your back. All right, now back to this episode.
I love how you articulate that just because that's the way things were, you can actually let go of those limiting or fixed beliefs. And this industry in particular gives people the opportunity to change the entire context of their circumstances.
Everything. I used to smoke, right? And back in the dealership days, you couldn't smoke on the front and the point. You had to smoke in the back, right?
Right.
I'm having a cigarette. Owner pulls up. S500, SL500. This must have been like 2003, right? Owner pulls up. He's got like 18 stores. He and I have a pretty good relationship. Smoking my cigarette. He's parking his car. I'm like, man, I want to get me one of those. Now at the time, I'm driving a Camry, no air conditioning, manual transmission, roll up windows. The car's 20 years old at that time. I'm driving I got nothing, right? My man pulls up in a $100,000 whip, and I'm like, man, I want one of those. This dude looks me dead in the eye and says, you want this? Your goals are too low. He's like, I know you got a kid. Your goal should be buy your son a house, have it paid off, and give it to him when he turns 25. That's a goal. This ain't nothing but a car. He's like, give me 10 grand. I'll wrap you up in a lease right now. That ain't a goal. Get your goals right. And he just walked off like nothing, right? Would I have heard that at Circuit City? Like, you know what I'm saying, right? So it's like, it's not just the environment, but it's the people that you put yourself around who can help you level up. And we all talk about this thing right now. Like, you got to see it to believe it. You know, you got to see it to believe it. You see in these people who are living lives, it seemed like you had to be, you know, again, ordained to have. And then I find out, like, the owner of my store, who again owned 17 or 18 stores, started off selling Sentras in Boulder, Colorado in the winter because he was looking for a hustle over winter break when he was in school. So he went from selling Sentras in the snow to owning all this, and he's sitting right here.
Right.
Bro, you know, so yeah, I'm going to be affectionate for it because it's a life changer. It's a total life changer. It's a neighborhood changer. It's a community changer. So yeah, I'm going to ride for it. I'm going to stick up for it.
This is why I love producing this show in particular, because we get to have conversations like this that really get to the heart of the matter. You know, I learned early on doing the show, like, we're talking by probably year 2 of doing this, we can only talk about how to sell a car so many minutes a Sunday. Like, we can only talk about the finance process so much before we get to the heart of the matter, which is people. You mentioned attrition earlier, and of course, that's one of those things that this industry is kind of, you know, people know about it. It's like, the turnover. You know, somebody calls for their sales rep 6 months later and that sales rep isn't there anymore, and so on and so forth. But as I'm listening to you talk, man, I think, like, we got to get to the heart of the matter that opportunity is available here in abundance in this industry. But number 2, then the question becomes, well, if I'm the individual that's struggling to make it, maybe I'm a 6 to 8 car person and I want to grow, or maybe I'm not closing these finance deals and the way that I should, or just things just seem to not be going my way, then if I can acknowledge that A, there's opportunities in abundance here, but B, then I got to be able to take a strong look in the mirror and ask the question, what ingredients are missing from my toolbox in order to leverage and take advantage of the opportunity? So I want to ask, in your experience, I mean, 18 years retail, on the corporate side, you work with a lot of dealers. You get to see a lot more than, you know, your average buyer.
It's true.
What are some common denominators? If you could, for the person listening or watching, what are the common denominators that you could say, hey, stop doing this, do this instead?
I got 2, and I love that question. I got 2. Okay. So the first one has to do with employee exposure, right? So I'm going to put myself in that position of that salesperson or that finance manager, whatever it is, that salesperson that's selling, you know, 6 or 7 cars per month, right? Have I been exposed to what the possibilities are? And an example would be when Matt Jones, who thought he was a pretty top shelf salesperson, was selling cars in Southern California. He once sold 34 cars. And you couldn't tell that man that he wasn't the best salesperson on the entire planet.
Right.
But what he did not know is that there was people out there that were selling 100 cars a month, right? I'd never been exposed to them. So if I didn't know that, I couldn't even reach for it, right? I couldn't even see that, oh, you hit 30 because 30 was the magic number at our store. If you hit 30, you're now walking on clouds, right? But to learn that there was actually people who were triplicating that. So it's the exposure is first and foremost. And the other part of exposure is, what exposure to other learning materials are you being exposed, like conversations like this, right? Beyond the forced trainings of, like, you know, I'm not knocking any of the trainings that the stores do, but those are localized. What else is there? So the first thing I think about is exposure, right? What is that person not seeing? There could be somebody out in the world who has the solution to your problem, but if you're not exposed to them and the people in your circle are not exposed to them, you may never get that answer. And that's why I like these conferences. That's why I like the podcast, because you're going to hear ideas that you may not have heard otherwise. So that's number 1. But number 2 is also, what role is the management playing to look at other values that you have that maybe you're not being utilized in your particular function. So as a salesperson, you may be tapping out at 6 or 8 cars. Okay, let's just say that that's the case. Does that mean that your only value to that organization is as a salesperson that can sell 6 to 8 cars? Perhaps you can create fantastic internet templates. Perhaps you're a monster on the phone. Perhaps you're great at going through deal jackets and looking for anomalies before they get sent off to a buyer. Is there some other value that you can offer the store beyond the 6 and the 8 cars? So the two things I think of are, what's your exposure? What are you being exposed to, right? Second thing is, what does your management see out of you, if anything? Are they looking at you and saying, well, we hired this person, we put them through training, we did the background, we did all that stuff. We see value in this person. Maybe we're not extracting it in the position that they're in right now. Perhaps we look at a different alternate position. Maybe they can bring more value to the organization. And look, the world's not about me, but I used to play football in high school. I wanted to be a receiver. I know it's hard to imagine because I'm all bulky now. But back
I thought Glee Club for sure. I mean, I was so many people.
A football player, right? And so I'm running. It turns out, although I was big and strong and fast, I couldn't catch all that well. Right. I wanted to be a receiver, but I wasn't big and my hands weren't very good. They made me a linebacker, took off, right? It wasn't in my mind. It wasn't my goal, but somebody else said, hey, I know you want to do this. You may not be best suited for that. Why don't you try this? And it turns out somebody else saw something in me that opened up other doors that I didn't see for myself. So again, exposure, and are you being utilized for your skill set? Those are the two things I think of when I think of people who are underperforming.
Oh man, you bring up, I'm trying to put my thoughts together here because there's so much I want to unpack. I see I'm like glitching out. I'm like, so much I want to unpack there. You bring up something I've been thinking a lot about lately. So I find it no coincidence that you're bringing it up, which is that each person in a business has a job to do. And sometimes I feel like we let the lines blur and we expect you to be able to do everything well. You know what I mean? Where it's like you said, the minute you switched positions, you thrived. It wasn't that you were the wrong person. You just weren't the right one in the spot you were in. And I think about this too, as we kind of examine hierarchies of a business. Mm-hmm. Is traditionally, you're the dealer principal, you're the general manager, you're the whatever. You are the top of the food chain. And there's part of me like I get that visual, but then I also think about myself as a CEO, in that I sincerely don't think I'm better or above any of my people that I work with, but that we simply have skill sets, experience, practical application that makes us best suited for the job role that we have.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I know this conversation isn't like, we're just talking, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons why I think that when we look at automotive, when we talk about opportunities for growth and expansion, it's one of the reasons why I think like diversity is such an important part of the conversation. It's not a better or it's not a worse. It's a difference, right? The language that a person may use or a background a person may use, it doesn't mean that they're better than you. It doesn't mean that they're worse than you. It is an aptitude that you may not have that can add an extra skill set or an extra value proposition to a team. So there could be a person, and actually it's interesting when you think about, there's a lot of conversation about bringing more women into automotive, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, when you bring women into automotive, there can be people who, if you have an organization that's very male heavy, right? There can be an entry-level person who could dunk on the highest rung of the male because that person is just, it's invisible to them, right? So when we talk about it, right person, right place, wrong, it's who are the people? And again, as we said at the very beginning, who are the people and that's why I'm so people focused, that is the key to success, is the utilization of people, right? Regardless if it's a CEO or regardless if it's a person on a, much more junior person, how are the people being utilized within the organization? And this isn't theoretical. These are things that I've seen working in pretty diverse markets at pretty diverse dealership groups that did significant amounts of business. When these groups became more diverse, either directed or not directed, sales grew. There's just one way to say it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Sales grew. They were introduced to, subprime shoppers, introduced to emerging market shoppers, introduced to fresh out of college shoppers who want to get their junior or their entry level car, their Fast and Furious car, whatever it is. And all of these things were invisible to people. Wasn't because they were bad. It's because they needed different people in the organization to show them what they're missing.
Matt Jones. This makes me think of, I've had conversations about this with Carrie Wise, with Erica Tiffany Wells, with Sandy Zanino, like people we know quite well that have all been on the show. And we've had this conversation. I mean, Patrice Banks, like who else have I had? Something I want to key in on that I hope that the audience is picking up on here is that it's one thing to have the conversation about these things. It's another thing to appreciate the experience that others have. Like, I think of it this way. Early in my 20s, I went to the Philippines and I did some mission work there. That was the most challenging thing I ever had to do, because one of the first instructions I received was, you will need to change the way you think in order to seek to understand the culture that you will be fully immersed in. And in many ways, in many ways, a lot of ways, I'm so grateful for that experience that took this short, stocky, white, Italian, Portuguese, high school wrestler and plopped him 14,500 miles away in the middle of the South Pacific, where now I'm the only one that looks different.
Oh, man.
I'm surrounded by 100 million Filipinos. I'm all of a sudden the weird looking one with the big long nose. They say taas na ilong, which means tall nose, but like long nose. And they'd say, oy tamboka, which means, man, you're fat. Right? And, oh man, and then the kids would do this to my arms. They'd say, balibo sa manok, which means chicken feathers. I mean, they are as smooth. Dude, they are as smooth. They go down the slip and slide easy. But I'm so grateful for plus, if you couldn't tell, I had to learn the language, because how else am I going to communicate with people? It's not like going to Europe where everyone speaks English. Right. There's 80 different dialects in the Philippines, and I get plopped in the middle. I'm so grateful for that experience, what you said. I know I'm rambling a little bit.
Not at all.
I feel like it uniquely blessed me with not just a like an agreeance with what you're saying, but an understanding of what you're saying.
Look, I'm going to tell you something that happened to me a couple days ago. Okay. This is going to sound wild, and I hope that we're still friends after this. Okay. All right. So we're talking about Tampa, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about Tampa. And if you live in LA, you fly out of LAX if you're forced to, right?
Right.
So to get to Tampa, I came out of LAX. I'm pulling into the parking lot, right? I pull into the parking lot on level 3, the main entrance. I'm ready to park. And I noticed that all the parking spots had a green EV in front of them, right? They were EV exclusive parking spots. And I was like, what kind of madness is this? I ain't got no EV, right? And so I drive through the first aisle, all EV. Second aisle, all EV. Third EV. I'm hot because there's parking spots that I could be using, but I don't drive an EV, so I can't use them, right? And I'm like, man, this is madness. This is madness. I finally found a spot. I had to go to like the 4th aisle, so it wasn't really a big deal, right?
Right.
And I was like, man, I'm like these people at LAX, man, they discriminating against me because I don't drive an EV, right? And I'm thinking to myself, bro, it's always been for you. Now it's a couple EV spots and you heated because you had to move an aisle over, right? And I was coming into the airport. I'm like, yo, is this what people feel like when other folks are talking about diversity conversations? Like, yo, it's all waiting for me now. I gotta move a little bit. Oh my God, I had so much fun with that thought in my head on the way over to Tampa. But the realization is some of those EV spots actually benefit me, right? Because now they're going to be in the carpool lane. They're not actually clogging up the regular lanes, right? They're parking in different spots, opening up other different spots for me. And so that differential, that seeing that difference and recognizing that, yo, when you're the different one, it's a weird feeling, right?
Right. Yeah.
But there's benefits to it. I bet that was weird being in the Philippines and being the only one that's like you.
Bro, like, I'm not even kidding you, dude. Like, I'm 5 foot, maybe 5'7" on a good day. Like, if I just went to the chiropractor and they stretched me out, and I'm a giant, right? Like, I'm a giant and I'm thicker and like, you know, but I feel like, yeah, it blessed my life in that, you know, anytime I sat down and had the diversity and inclusion conversation with Carrie or Erica or whoever, I'm like, yeah, I get it. This is common sense. But I think it's really because I experienced being the one that was so different in contrast to the mass. But it's also like, man, the airport, we could use so many analogies about the airport in seeking to understand why the diversity and inclusion thing is so important. Like, no place better segregates you and puts you in a class than the airlines. Like I'm talking, bro. One time I booked my buddy booked a flight for me and him to Vegas. This was to go to Grant Cardone's thing. My buddy goes, look, I'm on it. I'll book the flights. He's like, calls me up. Hey, I got the flights booked. I'm like, dude, dope. Because I hate booking travel. It's like one of my least favorite things. What I don't know is that he's put us on Frontier or Spirit Airlines or one of those ones. And like, first of all, I'm not knocking, but all I got to say is this was my first experience. And what I realized is that American Airlines boarding group 9 is the equivalent of flying private on Frontier.
And it's different. Yeah.
But then the empathy kicks in similar to you and you go, wait a minute, what a blessing this must be that it has opened up air travel to so many individuals who may previously not have been able to, you know, to have this accessible to them. And all of a sudden that's where the understanding comes in. So when it comes to, you know, a predominantly male industry or the diversity and inclusion, bringing more ethnicities into the mix, it's not like, oh, we got to do it because everyone got woke all of a sudden. The real conversation is arriving at a place of understanding that their experience and their life has blessed them with a different wisdom than you've been blessed with. And that together, that makes the whole much more powerful.
It's the truth. I had a conversation with this one dealer owner last year, and this kind of changed me, and I think it changed him a little bit. We were having it was after a diversity session, right? Okay, and this person I had this conversation with wasn't really a big fan of the diversity idea. His idea was that I'm just going to hire the best person for the job, no matter what, which I understand, right? And in our conversation, it came up that there were some emerging markets in his DMA, people speaking different languages and such. And one of the languages is Spanish that we were talking about. And he goes, why should I have to hire, some Spanish speakers to sell to these Spanish speakers? Good customer service is good customer service. And I said, do you speak Spanish? He goes, no, but I can learn Spanish. And he was being sincere, right? He was like, I could learn Spanish. I could take care of these folks. I said, you could learn Spanish and you could learn the culture. Or you can hire John, who already understands the language and already stands the culture, and you can continue to run the business and you can let John do all those things so that you don't have to take yourself away from running the store. And the idea, it just like, oh yeah, duh, right? And so his whole thinking was like, why do I have to be forced to do something that I could do for myself, where he hadn't necessarily seen this stops you from having to do other things, and you can focus on growing your business or expanding your stores or building your market share out, because John may already know the things that you'd have to spend 15 years learning. That's not
Right.
a productive use of time. And so when I have these conversations, or when I get into these diversity conversations, it's never about the rah-rah feels good. It's always about there's a dollar at the end of that tunnel. You know, you do these things, you open yourself up to opportunities you may not have seen otherwise. One example that I've given about change is, as you could tell, I was standing up, you could tell I like me some McDonald's, man. I love me some McDonald's.
Anybody that says they don't is lying.
They're lying. They're lying. They may feel bad about it afterwards, but who doesn't like them fries? You know,
It's like Jim Gaffigan says, 99 billion hamburgers sold. I'm no mathematician, but I'd say you're all lying.
that's exactly how it would feel. Now, I bet at some point, back when McDonald's opened up drive-thrus in like 1970, late 60s, 1970, whatever, I forget the exact year.
Yep.
There was some executive says, oh, just have them park in the parking lot like they have been doing, or we'll roll somebody out on roller skates like, you know, like these other folks do. Why do we need to install the extra expense, right? And I'd be willing to bet $1 that McDonald's has not lost any business because they have a drive-through. They added on, right? Their core business stayed the same. Now they have another. And so when I think of diversity, it's like it doesn't take away from your core. It adds on, right? So if you had 300, you're not going to have the same 300. You're going to have 310, 320, 330. It's an and, right? So I think that's what gets lost in the diversity conversation. But again, getting back to the earlier part, why do I like automotive so much is because I've seen it's a true meritocracy. You get out there and you sell 25 cars, you're getting paid like you sold 25 cars. If I sold 2 cars, unfortunately, you're going to get paid like you sold 2 cars, right? You got great CSI, you're going to be rewarded for it. If you don't, and it's really just on the whole, it's almost, and this is going to sound like really melodramatic, but when I look at the automotive industry, at least the retail arm of it, it is the embodiment of what we've called the American dream, where you get out there, you put in your work, you put in your effort, you try to get better, you dedicate yourself to your craft, and you will grow, and you will be rewarded for it. And in the automotive vertical, there may be other verticals out there like that, right? But within the automotive vertical, I've seen with my own eyeballs, people walk in here, and they now own several stores. And it wasn't because of any, in some cases it is, it helps if they have a background in automotive, but in some cases, these are people who have no background in automotive. They started, they learned, they grew. So if you like the idea of a person being able to prove their own worth and their merit, and you like the idea of being able to, you know, evaluate yourself on your own efforts unequivocally, I mean, there could be other industries out there. Automotive is the one that brings most often to me. I'll even, and I'm going to say something that's probably going to get, you know, punched in. I'm going to get punched in the face.
Don't get me canceled, man. No.
I'm not going to get you canceled. I'm not going to get you canceled. Kobe, remember Kobe?
Yeah.
Kobe. I'm in LA. We all love Kobe.
Right.
Last couple years of his playing, he was like, he wasn't the top tier basketball player that he was when he was younger. He was still excellent, better than everybody else, but he wasn't like super duper elite.
Right.
And I remember there was a contract conversation where they were saying, hey, your productivity has come down a little bit, and but you still think you're worth $35 million a year or $32 million a year? He said, how much are the Lakers going to make off of me? They're going to sell those jerseys. They're going to sell out those seats. They're going to sell out those rafters. Absolutely, I'm worth my $30 million or 35. Give me my money, right?
Right.
Most people don't have the opportunity to say that in their jobs like Kobe did. But at a car dealership, you have the opportunity to say that every single day that you show up to work. Are you worth that kind of money? Did I just make my owner $700,000 of revenue this month? I absolutely am. Pay me. And that's so, again, love it, love it, love it. I'm going to fight for it.
Yeah. And this ties right back to what we were talking about pre-show, about Jesse Itzler saying, hey, 18 minutes a day, 100 hours, and you'll be better than 95% of the population at that thing you're choosing to show discipline toward. I'm thinking, man, like for the person that's struggling, we're talking about 18 minutes a day over the next year is going to change your life. What do you need to learn? Is it people skills? Do you need to know how to like word tracks, stop. Develop yourself.
Yeah.
Spend 18 minutes enriching yourself in some way that will help you better serve people, and watch, like you're saying, Matt, like watch the windows of heaven pour out manna. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's going to hit you. You're going to be like, what do I do? Well, what do you mean? You made a choice to get disciplined and focused and learn and grow. And by virtue of that, the opportunities, it's not that the opportunities presented themselves. You put the right lenses on to see the opportunities that were there all along.
I'm going to give my one trick, okay?
Yeah.
My one trick. I'm going to give one trick. It's not a trick, but this is the one thing that I got really, really good at when I sold cars, okay? Happened by happenstance. I had a husband and wife combo come in to buy a car, and they were the support group for the husband's mom. So I'd been speaking to the husband over the internet for 4 or 5 days or whatever. The husband and wife came in. When they came in, I learned that the car that the husband and I were speaking for was actually for his mom. He was doing all the work for her, right? They're happy. Mom comes in, she gets her CRV, the deal's done. We're waiting for finance. This is something that actually propelled my career, this little thing right here. I asked the son, I said, hey, what are you driving? And he goes, I'm driving an Expedition. And I said, do you like it more than the Pilot? I said, you're already here, we're waiting for finance. Let's just go check out the Pilot real quick. And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? It turns out that him getting the Expedition, getting rid of the Expedition and buying the Pilot would actually cost him less money when you factored in fuel, right? So since he was there, I was like, well, you're already here. Why don't you just trade in the Expedition for a Pilot? And he goes, you know what? Why not? So Mom bought the CRV and then he bought the Pilot. And then I said kind of jokingly to the wife, I said, so what are you driving? And she's like, an A4. And I was like, well, how do you like it? She goes, well, you know, it's kind of funny. I have been thinking about getting something with better gas mileage. I just said, well, let's do the numbers. She got out of her A4, ended up in an Insight. 1 deal came in, 3 deals left, right? And my management team was like, how did you do that? And I thought to myself, why wasn't I doing that 5 years ago? Obviously, they already trust me. The rapport is already there. They trust me with their mom. That's the highest level of trust.
Right.
Yep. Why would I not try to expand that trust right here, right now? You know, as long as I'm offering value and I'm not going overboard and I'm not being, you know, who's going to say no to that? It's kind of like somebody saying, hey, would you like a dessert with your meal? You don't get offended when the waiter or waitress asks if you'd like a dessert. You say yes or no. You might say, what's the menu, right?
Right.
After I did that, if I had a husband come in, the wife was getting asked what she was driving. If I had a wife come in, the husband would get asked what they was driving. And I became so good at it that probably 5 or 6 times a month, there would be 2 deals that were delivered at the same time. It was just spouse and spouse, brother and sister, right? And it was such an easy thing to do. They're already here. The rapport is already built. You know, they already value the brand. They already trust the store. They trust the seller. So that's my one tip. If somebody's looking for what is something I could do immediately, talk to the spouse right then and there, the child, the father, the mother, and see if there's another opportunity to gain business because you're already 60% there.
Dang. I wrote it down. I wrote trick, offer them dessert. That's what I wrote down because I think it's brilliant and it's rooted in wanting to serve their best interests. Nothing malicious about it. It's just a common sense, like it's a question. Questions are free. And dude, I love it. I could talk to you all day. I just love your heart. It's clear you sincerely, deeply love this industry. You love people. And so I just want to thank you for joining me. How can those listening get in touch with you?
mjones@truecar.com. mjones@truecar.com. And this is going to sound kind of oddball, okay? But the people that I work with, they feel the same way. When I came to this space, I was actually surprised at how many people who work at TrueCar are actually from Automotive. which is not necessarily the case in all tech spaces. A lot of the tech spaces are people are like interchangeable. You worked at Netflix, now you're here. You worked at Ticketmaster, now you're here. Foundationally, we are from people who sold cars. And so a lot of our thinking, a lot of our belief, a lot of our partnership is because we love, because, you know, we feel the same way, you know? So I know it sounds kind of cheesy and kind of cornball, but that, you know, to be in an environment that you like really, really helps. And I'm lucky that I actually work around a lot of people who are actually not just techies or not just, you know, consumer folks. They actually know the car business. Our CEO's been in the business for over 40 years, you know? So, you know, so it's me, and I'm trying to be a reflection of TrueCar, because I think most of us actually have the same sort of love and affection for the automotive industry.
Love it, man. Thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.